an affluent African. The reason I'm deemed as such is I own my own home in a leafy suburb. I'm tertiary educated, I have a car, and I earn more than the national and possibly the continental average. So over some time, I've been questioning the roots of my outward perceived success. And I thought, well, it must be my great work ethic, commitment to learning, and passion for improvement. And then I thought that was okay for a while, and then I thought, no, that's really arrogant. Other people played a role in carving out my today's success. So then I thought about my parents and the values that they'd given me, the private school education that they had, that they'd awarded me, the fact that I didn't have to walk 20 kilometers for school and was driven to school in an air-conditioned car. And I thought, yeah, it's me and my parents. But after some time, and the more I questioned it and the more I thought about it, I realized that this monetary or economic success was not only mine as a result of my effort and my parents, but also that of those who came before us, whose cost can only be seen and understood when we look through history. You see, in the 1400s, the start of the slave trade, Portuguese captains Antoa Goncalves and Nuo Tristão came to Africa looking for gold. With them, they took 12 slaves and sold them in Portugal. 100 years later, the trend started to gather momentum. And so John Hawkins, an English captain, came to Africa to take 500 slaves and burnt villages to obtain them. So profitable was this trip that he came back to Africa another 3 times, taking back with him, in total, over 1,000 people. The conditions that people traveled in were deplorable. They were captured and spent the duration of these journeys in ships for several months. Men, women, and children were taken on board, stripped naked, and examined head to toe by the captain, laying below deck, shackled together with iron chains. They lived below deck with limited fresh air and poor sanitation, which greatly increased the risk of disease. And even by the time of the late 1700s and early 1800s, when the slave trade was finally abolished in law in European countries, approximately 12 million people had been expropriated from Africa over this timeline. But even then, with the slave trade being abolished, the ways to suppress African entrepreneurship and creativity was still being carved out. You had the Berlin Conference chaired by Otto von Bismarck, where a range of countries came together to carve out Africa to understand how they could benefit from the resources and the people of Africa to build their own economies. From day one, there was always indigenous resistance to colonization. And you get a glimpse into the mindset of people at the time by reading journals of the royal Ndansi Kumalo of the Ndebele people, who said about the British invasion, "They came and were overbearing, and we were ordered to carry their clothes and bundles. They interfered with our wives and our children. In fact, the treatment was intolerable. We thought it is best to fight and die rather than bear it." This resistance continued to the 20th century. When the 1950s and 60s, activism reached fever pitch in Africa. Each country faced its own unique dynamic. But what I would like us to realize is that at that time, at that point in time, it took courage and bravery to speak out for equality and sovereignty. Sometimes the price was not low. Sometimes the price paid was somebody's life. I have a picture here of the May 4th, 1978 Kasinga Day atrocities, where over 1,000 Namibian people died in the name of this goal. But thanks to the leadership and the bravery of our forefathers, Sam Nujoma, Patrice Lumumba, Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, Kenneth Kaunda, Nelson Mandela, the dream of an independent political Africa was realized after a struggle that had gone on for hundreds of years. So today, the narrative on Africa is changing. Africa rising is the agreed theme. Over the past decade, Africa has been amongst one of the world's fastest growing continents, averaging growth rates of about 5%. If you follow global economics, my fellow financial services people, I'm sure you note that current growth rates are probably between 0 and 1%. Africa is rich in agricultural land, oil, gas, precious metals, and minerals, to the extent that this continent is home to 1/3 of the planet's mineral reserves. There is global optimism shared about Africa. 34% of Africa's 1.1 billion people are now classified as middle class, which translates to over 300 million people. That's a lot of people. 791 million Africans live in homes that are at least one mobile phone. 495 million people have homes with a television. Over 300 million a home with a refrigerator. And over 100 million live in a home with a car. The number of households with electricity has doubled significantly, and the rise of online retail and the supermarket sector has grown exponentially. Large corporates, for the first time in modern history, are queuing up to find ways to harness the African middle-class consumer spend. But we have forgotten something, or chosen to forget. We have forgotten our culture of community, an Ubuntu that says, because I am, you are, and because you are, I am. We have forgotten that with great privilege comes great responsibility. And although our successes as affluent Africans are partially attributable to our own individual effort, it is also thanks to the effort of our forefathers. We have forgotten that those who challenged the status quo took risks for a new Africa to be born. Some of who, sadly, like those at Kasinga Day, never lived to see the Africa that you and I know to be a reality today. So I ask you today, while I have private health care, is it enough that the vast majority are still unable to pay for access to adequate health care and die from diseases that are preventable and curable? Whilst I have clean running water in my home, people still walk considerable distances to get water that might not even be safe for them to drink. And while my children have a private school education, there are people who are still learning under substandard structures. We have electricity, but there are those reading by candlelight in the pursuit of knowledge. And every other week you read of a story in the newspaper of a shack fire because people are seeking alternative lighting solutions. Another thing we've done is sometimes when we know something is wrong, we aren't always willing to say so in the name of self-preservation. Instead, we use our minds and skills and our voices only when the benefits are directly our own. We have become affluent, yes, but we have become apathetic. We have been handed a gift that came at significant cost, regardless of race, tribe, religion, or creed. But we're not passing this gift on. We are not asking ourselves, what kind of Africa are we building with our apathetic culture for the next 50 years? Sitting on the sidelines and not contributing to the level of our best individual effort fractures the society that our forefathers fought so hard to build. This is what we can do. We can recognize that political independence was not a destination, but only one pivotal point in a long journey. We can acknowledge that as a society, we need to continue this journey and legacy of the gift that was given to us. not just to benefit ourselves, but to help our country and this continent reach its greatest potential to achieve wider economic inclusivity. And so I put forward to you a call to action that requires you to put your hands up to reach the next pivotal point in our history. That creates an Africa where the same gift we have been handed is accessible to anyone that wants it and is willing to work for it. We can volunteer our time, our minds, and our skills where it is required. We can mobilize our finances to empower institutions to make economic and social investments. We can also accept that with affluence comes influence, and we can be the voice for the voiceless, and keep our leadership accountable through intelligent, respectful, and well-constructed debate. So before I leave, I'd like to leave you with a Fred Rogers quote that says, "We live in a world in which we need to share responsibility. It is easy to say, it is not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. But then there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people to be my heroes." I thank you.